Wow, your discussion was very hot. Very hot reflection, huh? Very good, very good. So everybody is okay? It looks
Yes.
like fresh and not sleepy, right? Okay, good. So we will continue our lectures. Actually, the most difficult part of the history was the previous session that we had. Sorry. I will share this PowerPoint. The most difficult part of the history was the parallelism. So some may not like that numbers, all those things, right? But this today's lecture, I think it's more about the contemporary events that we actually know about it and we study in the history. So it's more easy to maybe relate with it. Okay, so if you remember, before the Jesus Christ was coming, there was a 400 years of preparation also. Started from Prophet Malachi, right? So started, that's the time that the uh, Jewish people, Israelites, they repented, and then there was a reformist. Who was the reformist? That Prophet Malachi that started to correct the mistakes and everybody repent and then make determination to prepare themselves for receiving the Messiah. So that's the last 400 years that happened. So we are going to discuss about the last 400 years of this 2000 years from Jesus Christ onwards, this 2000 years. So we studied that the last 400 years started from 1517, right? So what happened exactly 1517? It was the time of the many reforms and changes was happening in the Christianity, and revival, many revival was happening, many awakening of the people of their responsibility. Because most of the time in the history, different religions, they are kind of, the followers losing their way, or they were being distracted. They, uh, like what happened when Israelites, they went to the Canaan, right? For many years, they have been working hard that in the desert, suffering under the sunshine, and walking towards that place. And then finally, the second generation was able to enter to Canaan. But when entered to the Canaan, again they forgot what is their responsibility. This is not the story of the Israelites. This is the story of human being. Even now, each one of us, we are the same situation. So what happened to the Israelites when they went to the Canaan? Wow, very inspired, that kind of things. But they forgot what is their mission, what is their responsibility. They forgot what kind of inspiration they received during the, when they were in desert, and how God saved them from all those things. And then when they went to the Canaan, they forgot their tradition. They got married with the Canaanites, and they start to worship the Canaanites gods. And there was a confusion. That is happening not only in the time of the Israelites, during the history, to every religion that has happened. Every religion, they have a peak, And then when they reach to the peak, somehow, if the followers forget their original path, who they are, where they come from, what is the original mission, they can be distracted and lose the way. So then needed a reformation. God is sending somebody to reform, to reawaken the people that we are in the wrong track. So our life of faith is like the same. We are, uh, for example, when we join, our faith is very strong. After 1 month, 2 months, 1 year, we might lose our determination, lose our energy, lose our inspiration. And again, we need a revival. So what is that revival? We need to join another 7 days workshop. We need to join 21-day workshop. It's reviving our spirit is very important. It's like what? It's like um, a, a knife which is not sharp cannot cut anymore. Needs to be sharpened, right? And all the time needs to be sharpened that can cut, can fulfill his mission and responsibility. So our life of faith is the same. So we are going to discuss about, you know, the last 400 years. So we'll start to read. The period of preparation for second advent of the Messiah was the 400-year period from the Protestant Reformation in 1517 to the end of the World War I in 1918. So this is the last 400 years. So what happened that there was a reformation? Because that time that Christianity, which was basically under the Catholic Church, Roman Church that time, what happened? Um, they lost their direction. We call it the Dark Ages, right? And even many of the scientists, like famous scientists that they were talking about science, they were executed, or those people who were talking against uh, the established church, so they were being threatened not be able to talk, to reform. So out of this kind of confusion situation, Martin Luther appear from the church, and he started to, because until that time nobody could read even the Bible, right? The people could not read the Bible by themselves directly. So when Martin Luther came, he said that no, we have this, you need to have your individual faith to God, not anybody can interpret it for you. So with this respect to the providence of restoration, this period is divided into three periods: the period of the Reformation, the period of religious and ideological conflict, and the period of the maturation of politics, economy, and ideology. So this 400 years has been divided into three parts. We will discuss more on details. So the period of Reformation, which started from 1517 to 1648, was 130-year period of the Reformation. Began in 1517 when Martin Luther raised the banner of Protestant Reformation and lasted until the wars of religion were settled by Treaty of the Westphalia in 1648. So this Reformation, the changes happened for 130 years. That the Bible was translated to the different languages, and the people were starting to read by themselves and have their individual relationship with God, personal relationship with God, not being like having a mediator between them and God. So in the late Middle Ages, man's original mind was repressed, its free development blocked by the social environment of feudalism and the secularization and corruption of the Roman Church. Medieval Europeans were prompted by the impulses of their innermost hearts to break down their social environment, to open the way for the restoration of their original nature. So, what make humankind to progress in their faith is exactly the original mind of every human being. Even though human being has fallen, we have fallen, our lineage, our original sin that has been inherited from the Satan, and we fall, we inherited the characteristics of the Lucifer and Satan because of the blood lineage. Even though there is a part in every human being that is untouched, that is coming from God, that God put in every human being, that is innermost heart of every single person. Even the most criminal people, they have this original mind inside of them, telling them that they have to do their best. There is, we might call it conscience, inner conscience, our original mind, that God exists, even though we are fallen, but that original nature has not been changed. Because of that, we have this chance to restore ourselves. If that original mind, original nature, innermost heart that God exists inside of each one of us did not exist, our restoration was impossible. We could not restore ourselves. But because of the impulses, the impulses, signals that are coming from that innermost heart, from our inner conscience, the signals that are coming to us, helping us, telling us that who am I, where I have to go, I'm not belong to this place that I am, my mission is a different mission, I am lost. Like for example, these movies, when you have seen that some people are lost in an island, and they have a radio, and that radio sometimes is sending some signals. It's broken, but there is sometimes sending signals, and you can hear something that you belong not to belong to that island, you belong to somewhere else. It's reminding us about something, our original place. So because of that innermost impulses, the people start to break down their social environment to open the way for the restoration of their original nature. So this is a very important point, that we understand that no matter how sinful a person may be, can be restored. Every single person can be restored. Even the most criminals can return back to God because of that original mind that is being untouched and is related to God. God has put in every human being. So the Cain type movement began as a revival of Hellenism. It gave rise to the Renaissance, whose core value was humanism. The Abel type movement began as a revival of the Hebraic heritage of the Israel and the early Christian church. It gave rise to the Protestant Reformation, whose core value was faith in God. So two kinds of movement at the time of the Reformation started. The seed of two kinds of movement was made at that time of the Reformation. Where did it come from? Where did they originated from? One went back exactly, it's the time of Jesus. Also, two kinds of movement were existing. One was the Hellenism, that in the time of the Roman Empire were existing, which was more on the external aspect of the life were emphasizing. And then from more internal aspect was Hebrewism culture, which God directly through the prophets, through Moses, was raising and training the Israelites to follow Hebrew tradition and culture. So two kinds of movement before the Jesus Christ were existing. Hellenism, which was more external, emphasizing on more philosophy, on science, technology at that time. Hebrewism, more internal, was emphasizing our relationship with God of the Israelites at that time. So based on these two movements, that the time of the Jesus, the seed of the similar movement was established at that time. What was that? Humanism. Humanism at the time of Reformation. A group of people started to make a movement based on the human ability. This kind of movement, what was their ideology? It was, they were talking about this, that human being can take care of themselves even without any you know, energy or resources coming from the spirit world. So they were focusing on more on scientific aspects, that science, we accept anything that scientific measurement. So that was the beginning for making Renaissance. Renaissance was based on this way of thinking of the humanism, sorry. So, and then based on the Hebrewism tradition, a new movement start with the faith, which was the Protestant Reformation, and more emphasizing of our relationship, our faith, renewal of our faith with God. So these two movements started at the time of the Reformation. So medieval Europeans' external pursuit of the original nature led to a movement to revive the ancient heritage of Hellenism. This brought about Renaissance. So it's more on body, external aspects of our life. We are created attain perfection by fulfilling our given responsibility of our own free will. We are then to attain oneness with God and acquire true autonomy. Therefore, it is the calling of our original nature to pursue freedom and autonomy. So this is inside of us. We are, as human being, we have been created to be free and have autonomy, have our make decision, our own decision. So even though our destiny has been predestined, but we have the autonomy and freedom to fulfill that destiny or not to fulfill that destiny, right? So humanity has been created with this kind of uh, ability. And a person of perfect character understand the will of God and puts it into practice through his own insight and reason. Hence, it is only natural that we pursue reason and understanding. So, through our intellect, we can use our reasoning and our understanding and make decision. So God has given to us, if we want to depict the characteristics of the personality of God, we can say that in the center of God is heart, and in external aspect of God is emotion, intellect, and will. God has emotion, God has intellect, is intellectual, and has will. So the same thing, we as his children are completely similar. Every children is inheriting the same thing as their parents. So we have also intellect, reasoning, understanding. So that's why for reasoning and understanding, where do we go? Where do we kind of develop our reasoning and understanding? We go to the school, we go to university, and our intellect and our reasoning is developing. So we also are endowed with the God-given right to master the natural world. Hence, we value the natural world, pursue science, and esteem the practical life. So this external pursuit of original nature are not bad, right? So they are all coming from God. We need to develop a beautiful world through technology, through science, to make the most beautiful world, the most enjoyable and most comfortable situation for us. Technology and science is a gift to humankind. And what is the purpose of the creation, right? I remember, what is the purpose of the creation? Is joy and happiness. Joy and happiness. So for for human being to have more joyful life, to enjoy and live a beautiful life, making a beautiful environment, we need science. So we cannot deny science comes from God. So the Reformation, at that time, as the people advocated humanism, they also rebelled against the ritualism and the rules of the church, which were constraining their free devotion. So, as I explained, uh, the religion and the church was kind of trapped into the rituals, just following the rituals, lost the spirit. Sometimes we're just following the rituals, but is our heart, is our spirit developing? Is our spirit connected to God? You know, we are talking about something that we are doing it habitually without any understanding, without any feeling that what am I doing? Is my faith really uh, changing, improving my relationship with God or not? So if the rituals and tradition improving our relationship with God, that's good. Day by day, you feel that your relationship with God is becoming deeper and deeper and deeper. You day by day, you feel more peace. You feel more understand God's heart. That is good. But if we involve two kinds of rituals and rules, but no spirit, no improvement in our relationship with God, that's kind of dangerous. We will stop. Our development, spiritual development will be stopped. So we have to check. So at that time of the medieval church, medieval time, what happened? The people, their original mind, they were telling them that they are looking for freedom from of devotion that can develop their relationship with God. So that's why they rebelled against the rituals and rules of the church at that time. They fought against the stratified feudal system and papal authority, which deprived them of autonomy. So autonomy, we said that that's coming from God, right? God has given us these characteristics. It's in our nature. They protested the medieval view that faith required unquestioning obedience to the dictates of the church in all areas of life, which denied them the right to worship God according to the dictates of the conscience based on their own reading of the Bible. So it's kind of uh, they broke the walls of their relationship with God, the barriers that have been made at that time. They also questioned the otherworldly and ascetic monastic ideal, which devalued the natural world, science, and the practical affairs of life. So that time also they questioned what? They questioned because there was a movement was telling that external things are not good. You know, science is not good. You need to just follow, the spiritual life. Money is not is dirty, or external life is not good, is against the will of God. So that Reformation also questioned that kind of thinking. Why? Because as we explained that God has created the science, everything external world also for the purpose of humankind to live in a joyful and happy life. So both of them are wrong. If if the if the religious people deny the importance of the science for improvement of the life, for modernization of the life, is not good. From the other side also, those scientists, if they deny the spiritual aspect of life, the existence of God also, they will be in the wrong direction. So a spiritual and external life, which is science, both of them are necessary. Why? Because through science we discover about our physical body, physical world, and through religion we discover about our internal life, our spiritual life. So we study the divine principles. So both of them are important. The period of religious and ideological conflicts refers to the 140 years. So the second part of that 400 years. Beginning with the secure establishment of the Protestantism at the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 and ending with the French Revolution in 1789. As modern people continue to pursue the internal and external desires of their original nature, they could not avoid divisions in theology and disputes among philosophies arising from freedom of faith and thought. So when the Reformation happened, there was a freedom of faith and thought. So there was a confusion also, right? Different kinds of faith arise, and kind of the different kinds of schools of the philosophies. They were saying that our philosophy is correct. The other side was telling that our philosophy is correct. So it kind of, confusion happened in this 140 years. And the Cain type and Abel type views of life develop in this period of time, as we will discuss more about these two types of views, Cain type and Abel type views, because this Cain type and Abel type views has come with us until this time in history. Even now they exist. So we need to know the root of where does these two kinds of system and ideology came from. So Cain type view of life. Let's read Renaissance humanism elevated human beings and the natural world over God. Right? So Renaissance, as we discussed, this is the Cain type view of life. How did it start? It started with Renaissance humanism, only emphasizing on the importance of human being, on the importance of the science, on the importance of the material things. Elevated human beings and the natural world over God. Put natural world, science, body more important than internal life and our spirit over the faith to God. The Renaissance established a new perspective on life which sought to understand the universe through reason and experience, logic and experiment. What does it mean? It means that they started to make a movement to understand and perceive the things in the universe through reason and experience, logic and experiment. And they said that whatever that we can measure it through the experiment, we accept it. If we cannot measure it through the experience and experiment, we deny it, we don't accept it. So solely, merely experimental viewpoint. The Renaissance gave birth to a view of life which encouraged people to follow only external pursuits, blocking their path to God and leading them towards Satan's realm. For this reason, it is called the Cain type view of life. The Cain type view of life grew through the Enlightenment and matured into the Marxism, which became the cornerstone of the communist world of today. So this Cain type started from that Renaissance, step by step, little by little, right? Developed, 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 and Satan used it to make his own ideology and philosophy, which was matured into the communism that totally, first it started with the focusing on the natural world, on science. Little by little, there some philosophers of this Cain type viewpoints, they started to add to that, add more, and then little by little completely make a philosophy to totally deny the existence of the spirit world and God. And then communism was born. So this is the Cain type view of life. The Abel type view of life, what happened? The Reformation spawned philosophies and religious teachings which develop a multidimensional view of life, seeking to realize the God-given original nature of human beings. So from the other side, another movement was developing by God, which was Abel type view of life. This view of life guided modern people to seek God in a deeper and more thoughtful way. We call this the Abel type view of life. That's a time that many philosophers, spiritualists, they came at that time, and then they discovered more deeper understanding about the spirit and then they discuss about the spirit world. So it become more deeper and deeper, the level of the faith of the humankind, or those people who were following these kinds of movement. In diverse ways, the able type view of life mature to form the democratic world of today. So democracy did not develop just over the night, right? It had a process, and it started from Hebrewism. You remember that they discussed Hebrewism, reformation of the faith, and then reformation happened, and that based on that reformation in the Christian world, democracy was established. So if you look at the world, let's look, most of the countries that they have democracy, have a successful, almost successful democracy, are Christian background, right? Those countries, you look at to the Middle East, they're still struggling to have a democracy. They cannot have, right? Because democracy did not just happen by itself. It's not an kind of external system that was developed, by some people gathered together. No, there was a, this is based on the able type view of life. And we know that the first democracy and the most strong democracy in the world in the last 20th century was United States. So United States was the hotbed of the Christianity, the place that the Christianity actually blossom and bloom in the Western world. So this period refers to the 130 years between the French Revolution in 1789 and the end of the World War I in 1918. So Cain type and Abel type views of life mature, taking their separate path. So they matured, they developed more and more philosophers in each realm, in each ideology. They added something more, they added something more, they make it more mature, and they, after maturation, two kinds of system in 20th century we saw based on that. What was that? Democracy and communism. As they matured, they founded two different forms of society with distinct social structure, a Cain type society and Abel type society. In this way, those espousing the Cain type view of life championed the Enlightenment and gave rise to the French Revolution, thus establishing Cain type democracy. So democracy, Cain type democracy, which was developed, become communism, started from the French Revolution. It would later be systematized into Marxism. So Marx came and he started to add something. He made his own philosophy and then more developed it. He make more, reason into it to justify that God does not exist, right? So they developed over a period of the time, not just over the night. And Leninism in Russia. So Marxism in Germany and Leninism in Russia, eventually forming the communist world. The most horrifying system in the history of humankind. The most scary kinds of philosophy, ideology, political system that human being has seen, has been ever encountered was this communism. Because totally denied the existence of God. And millions of people, actually, they have been killed in this communist world. How did they start? They started with giving good and very tempting slogans. We are going to make everything free for you, and then we are protecting the uh, rights of the workers, right? The workers are in the highest position in the society, so they giving, and the people believed in them, and they were really excited. And then little by little, when the people trusted them, little by little they start to control the people and make the people to become slaves in that kind of system. The people wake up and then they find out that, my gosh, we are already prisoners of a group of people that they are searching for their own benefit and well-being. So they were using this communist ideology to actually for their own selfish desires. From the other side, God was working, right? Even if Satan was working to develop communism, God was working to make a counter, to make a able type system. So sincere Christians, Puritans, the fruits of the able type view of life, founded the able type democracies through their victorious fight with the absolutism to win the religious freedom. So Puritans, who are they? They were the faithful Christians that they were tired of the tyranny in the Europe, and they were looking for the land of freedom that they freely worship God, and they in the search of that land, so they went and they found America, North America, right? So that is current USA. So even their story is so interesting that when they entered to that place, the first thing that they established was the church, not houses. They didn't build houses first, they built churches. That much faith and God was their priority in their life. Second, what they built? Schools. They built schools. Education of their children was second priority. Third, they start to build their own houses. Even I was reading some speeches from Father Moon that was talking about the history of how Puritans sacrificed at that time. They had some seeds during the winter. They did not even eat those seeds. They kept it for the spring that they can plant those seeds for the purpose of survival of their movement they started. So many people sacrificed their life actually. So based on this sacrifice, based on putting God first, God made this uh, able type democracy. Many Puritans emigrated to the American continent to obtain religious freedom. They founded an independent nation in 1776 and established American democracy. Able type democracy has developed from these beginnings into the democratic world of today. So when we see democracy, it didn't happen over the night. Many people, anything that is happening, there are many people sacrifice. But what is the difference of the uh, this movement and the communism? For the communism also, the many people sacrifice. What kind of difference is that? The group of people in the high position sacrifice others for the sake of their benefit, selfishness. So it was developed for the selfish purpose. But this democracy, able type, was for the sake of sacrificing themselves for the sake of God and for the sake of other people. So the concept of the separation of the powers into three branches of the government was advocated by Montesquieu. It sought to prevent the concentration of the political power in the hands of a single individual or institution. The idea was proclaimed in the Declaration of the Rights of Man during the French Revolution. So there was a person, his name was Montesquieu, and he was thinking that how to overcome the tyranny. What is the problem that every time that the kind of a system of the government is coming, it turns to tyranny and dictatorship. So based on that, he started to design. He thought that if legislative, judicial, and executive, they are separate from each other, not in the hands of one individual person, then the dictatorship can be eradicated. No more dictatorship. So from the beginning, the separation of power was to be characteristics of the political structure of God's ideal society. So we discussed that always Satan is know what is God's next step. Satan knows what is God's plan in the next step. What is God's plan to build the kingdom of heaven? What is the system of kingdom of heaven? So in the kingdom of heaven, actually, there is this kind of system: legislative, judicial, executive. But it works under Christ as the spinal cord and God as the brain. So Satan wanted to mimic that, forgot about God and the Christ, and just make this legislative, right? Separate legislatives. So that's why still, even though in the Western countries that they started this democracy and system first, still we see that we don't have an ideal government. We don't have an ideal system yet. Yet here again, Satan was mimicking an aspect of the principle ahead of its realization by God. Hence, the three branches of the government, the legislative, judicial, and executive branches, should interact in harmonious and principled relationships by following God's guidance as conveyed through Christ. So I have a question. If we look at this structure as a body, human body, can anybody say if God is the brain, Christ or the Messiah is the spinal cord, what organs of the body are legislative, judicial, and executive? Can you text it down in the text part? Legislative, judicial, and executive are symbolized of three organs of our body:
Lung, heart, and stomach.
heart, stomach, and
Lung.
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 Very good, very good. Okay, so that's these three important organs of the body. Okay, good. Today's democracies characterized by the three separate branches of government and a proliferation of political parties resemble the structure of a healthy human body to some extent. So a healthy human body would be a healthy human body when there is brain, when there is good relationship with the brain. If our if the lung relationship, heart relationship, stomach relationship, physical body relationship with the brain is not good, what kind of person is that? Crippled, handicapped, right? Cannot work harmoniously. Handicap or crippled is the problem of the spinal cord and that the relationship with the brain. So today's political system is actually, yes, there is legislative, there is judicial, there is executive, but it's crippled, handicapped, cannot function properly. Why? Because the political parties, which are the spinal cords, need to work centering on God's will, not their own will and their own benefit. They need to know what is God's will. So this is something missing in the political system of the current world. That's why we don't have a perfect political system at this moment. We don't have it. Every country you see that they're suffering. They are, something is missing. There is no perfect system. There are political parties, there is legislative, there is judicial, there is executive, but the problem is that the political parties need to know clearly what is God's plan for an ideal society. What is God's blueprint? What is God's desire for an ideal society? Does not know that. That's why they do their best, but it's still not perfect. Since the political parties are ignorant of the will of God, however, they may be compared to a nervous system which is unable to transmit directions from the brain. Crippled system. Since constitutions are not written in accordance with the word of God, the three branches of the government currently function like internal organs, which cannot sense or respond to the commands of the brain because the peripheral nerves have been severed. They lack order and harmony and suffer continual conflicts among themselves. So even these three legislatives, they are in conflict with each other. In every country, we can see this kind of problem actually is happening. Legislative, they are not harmonized totally with the executive. They are not harmonized with each other with the judicial. Somehow they are against each other. They don't cooperate with each other. They are not in harmony. For example, if your lung and heart and stomach, they don't want to live in harmony and cooperate with each other, what will happen? There would be sickness. You will get sick. The same thing is that in the society, political system are sick in the current system, political system of the world. So therefore, Christ at the second advent will remedy the illness of the present political system that it may reflect God's design by restoring people's vertical relationship with God. This will unleash society's true potential. So what is the mission of the Christ? Restore humankind back, our relationship with God. The Messiahs, the first thing that the Messiah is going to do is that telling us about who is God, God's nature, God's wish, God's will. We cannot communicate, we cannot attend God if we don't know who is God. If we have a vague, unclear understanding about God, we cannot attend God properly. So that Messiah's number one mission is that will come and tell us who is God, what is his nature, what is his wish, what was his plan for creating the world, creating humankind, and based on that we will become aware of the existence of God, the nature of God, his plan, and then we start to restore our vertical relationship with God. That's why you are listening to this divine principle, because this is the most you want to fix your relationship with God. You need to know Him very well. You
Ano ko
need
ba
to
sa remedy, remedy?
remedy, remedy. Yeah. Anyway, maybe different pronunciations. Yeah. So anyway, the main important thing is that we need to know about God's nature. So that's why. Where did we learn about the God's nature? Chapter 1 of the divine principle, right? The purpose of God, why God created this universe. What kind of nature God has. How do we understand? We study about the this pair system, male and female, right? So positive and negative, anion and cation. So we all these things we actually learn how to restore our relationship with God. The economic structure of the ideal society also resembles the structure of a healthy human body. So economics structure of the ideal society also resembles the structure of a healthy human body. How does it work? A healthy economy? In every economy there is producing, some group of people producing, they are producing, for example, products. Then this production needs to have an effective distribution. Like for example, you have a factory which you are raising up chicken, or you are producing egg. Okay. Next one is that distribution. Do you have a good distribution system to give and send the egg fresh on time to the consumers to consume or not? So these three aspects of the economy are very important. Every economy that has a good production, has a good distribution, and good consumption is a healthy economy. So production, distribution, and the consumption should have an organic, interdependent relationship, such as that which exists between the digestive, circulatory, and metabolic system. So there should be adequate production of necessary and useful goods, fair distribution to supply what is sufficient for people's needs, and reasonable consumption in harmony with the purpose of the whole. Right? So what is that? We need to have adequate production, enough production. You need to intake enough nutrition. When you take enough nutrition, your digestive system will break down the food into the small parts. And then who is going to distribute it in your body? Your blood, circulatory system of your blood will distribute the food to all your metabolic system, which are the consumers of the food. So the metabolic system work properly. But if you take so much, you eat too much, you take too much fat, right? Not to have a balanced diet, what happens? So your digestive system make production more than the needs of your metabolic system. What will happen? If there are extra fat, They will be accumulated in the organs of your body. The fat will be accumulated in the liver. The fat will be accumulated around the stomach. The fat will be accumulated around your heart. And then it will cause sickness. The same thing in the society, economy. Economy, there should be enough production. And then the good distribution system, send it to every part of the country as fast as possible, and then sufficient for every people's need, and the people take as much as they need, not to store and accumulate it. For example, one person buy all the eggs from the market and store it in his house. What will happen? Suddenly become the shortage of egg, right? And then the demand become more than production, become more expensive. So a healthy economy is following the same situation structure of the physical body, healthy physical body. The mass production born of the Industrial Revolution led England to claim vast colonies as sources of raw materials and markets for goods. In so doing, the Industrial Revolution opened up a vast territory for the propagation of the gospel. Accordingly, it contributed to both the internal and external aspects of the providence of restoration. So, what happened when the Industrial Revolution happened? Machineries. Before they were doing manual, right, with their hand. For example, one person was building products with his hand. It takes time, right? It takes time if you want to do it with your hand. So make production was just enough for the people in England. But when the Industrial Revolution happened, when machineries, automation, automatic system of the machineries because of the Industrial Revolution happened, there was overproduction, mass production. So this caused England, which was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution in the Europe, were looking for the sources and market. They wanted more raw materials. The raw material was not enough, and they wanted to sell their goods to more people because already enough for the British people. So that's why this became a motivation to travel and go to other countries of the world, right? To discover other parts of the world. So this was actually internal aspect. What was the internal aspect? Because God wanted to propagate the gospel all around the world through this kind of motivation given to the European people. And then God wanted that the European people go and share the blessing, their technology with the rest of the world, with the places that they are going and finding. But what happened? Mother Moon, in her autobiography, if you read that, she says that she went to the Africa, right? Africa, and she went to the place in the Senegal that many slaves. There was a house, right, and there was a door. In that door, there were many slaves that were sent out. They were sold out to the Europeans and to the America, different places, and it was called the door of never return. They never, whoever passed through that gate, entered to the ship, they did not return back anymore. So that's why True Mother says that even though many Christians came to Africa, to different parts of the world, some of them they had a good motivation of bringing the gospel, but some of them also they had not a good motivation. They were looking for their own benefit, for colonization, that we call it. Following the Industrial Revolution, spurred by the rapid progress of science, industrialization created economies characterized by overproduction. The great powers of the Europe grew strong as they competed with each other in the scramble for colonies. That's why Europeans, France, Italy, um, England, they were looking for more land, more countries to colonize, because there was a competition between these countries to earn more, to gain more. So they were kind of competing with each other. The Cain-enabled trends in ideology and economic development caused the later political divisions of the world into democracy and communism that we explained. So, world wars. May I know what time is it? 9:09. Okay, so we have time. So now we are going to discuss about the providential meaning of the world wars. Wars break out due to such factors as conflicts of political and economic interest and clashes of ideology. Yet, these are merely external causes, and there are also internal causes of the wars. So wars are not for external reasons, are not happening for that external reasons. There is an internal reason for the wars that are happening. We think that is a political problem or economic interest, that the countries they are fighting with each other, but actually not. It goes back to internal aspects. For example, there is a war going on, for example, among the different countries in the world. They might think that they are fighting over the territory, but actually no. If you look at the history of that two countries, you see that they had a kind of resentful history over each other. That's why their war is erupting again, and it's happening again and again and again. So accordingly, we cannot grasp the providential significance of the world wars by focusing only on external causes. So what is the reason? Internal and providential causes of the world wars. The world wars have occurred. Number one, why did it happen? As a result of Satan's last desperate struggle to preserve his sovereignty, because Satan knew that this is the last days of humanity, last days of Satan. He knew that these are his last days. As we study in the chapter last days, right? What is last days? Last days, there's no that the earth will not be destroyed physically. What is last days? Last days is the time that the evil will lose its power gradually, and goodness will take over and control the world. This is called last days. Last days of evil. So Satan knows that. He desperately wants to preserve his power. That's why he started the world wars. Second, in order to fulfill the worldwide indemnity conditions to restore the three great blessings defectively realized by Satan in advance. Right? So Human being, what is our purpose? Is to fulfill three great blessings. What is the first blessing? Individual perfection. What is second blessing? Perfection of forming an ideal family. What is the third blessing? To dominate the creation with true love. So these are three blessings that God has given to us. So Satan knows what are the three blessings that God gave to Adam and Eve. That's why he is going to mimic, to realize three great blessings in the satanic realm, in kind of fake system that he created in the human history. Third, in order that all humanity may overcome on the world level the three temptations by which Satan tempted Jesus. So three temptations of Jesus, humanity have to pay in the worldwide level for Jesus' three temptations. Fourth, in order to fulfill the worldwide indemnity condition to restore God's sovereignty, world is paying indemnity for restoration of God's sovereignty. So one by one we will discuss about it. In the political sphere, the First World War was a conflict between the Abel type democracies and Cain type authoritarian states. Who were they? What countries? In the economic sphere, it was fought between the imperialist nations on God's side and the imperialist nations in Satan's side. So that was the time of the imperialism. In the sphere of religion and ideology, the able type nations of Great Britain, United States, and France, which generally upheld Christianity. So one side was Christianity, fought the Cain type nations of Turkey persecuting Christianity, and its allies Germany and Austria-Hungary. So there were countries, Turkey was persecuting Christianity at that time, and he had some allies, Germany and Austria-Hungary, and the First World War. So there was a clash between these two groups. Who attacked first? The satanic world attacked first to the Abel. Abel defended and got victory also, right? So who got victory at the end of the First World War? The side, Abel side, which was Britain, USA, and France, got victory at that time. So these Christian nations made a foundation for the birth of the Messiah. When did it finish exactly, the First World War? 1918. Later we will discuss that. When is the time of the appearance of the Messiah, right? When will be born. So there is a relationship with this date. Okay, so World Wars. I'm going forward or okay. Okay. So the victory of God's side in the First World War. Number one, fulfill the formation stage indemnity condition to restore God's three great blessings worldwide. What is the first blessing of God? Individual perfection. Many people sacrifice in the worldwide level for the sake of the Messiah to be born. Messiah means whom? A person who reached perfection. Ideal man who fulfilled the first blessing in his life. Number two, fulfill the indemnity condition to restore God's first blessing worldwide by overcoming Jesus' first temptation on the worldwide level. So paid indemnity for the first temptation of the Jesus. Why the world paying indemnity for the first temptation of Jesus? Why? Because Jesus was not supposed to go over that 40 days of the fasting. If John the Baptist accepted Jesus, was not necessary that Jesus had to go through that course of the suffering and being tempted by Satan. Number three, established through the victory of democracy, the formation stage foundation for the restoration of God's sovereignty. So, victory for democracy, democratic nation, God victory at that time to make a sovereignty of God. God's sovereignty was expanded after the World War I. This laid the foundation for the birth of the returning Christ and the formation stage of the dispensation of the second advent commenced. In the Second World War, democracy, US, Britain, France, again, while standing upon the formation stage, victory attained in the First World War, defeated fascism, Germany, Japan, and Italy, and secured victory at the growth stage. So in the Second World War also, the able type God victory. The victory of God's side in the Second World War fulfilled the growth stage in empty condition to restore God's three great blessings worldwide. The First World War I, what was that? Make a foundation for individual perfection, for the birth of the Messiah. Second World War, what is the second blessing? Ideal family. Establish an ideal family. So this World War II made a foundation for an ideal man and ideal woman join in the marriage and form an ideal family. Why an ideal family do we need? Because the first family of humankind, Adam and Eve, they become a fake family. They become fake parents. That's why God is raising up a Messiah and his wife to make an ideal family, a model system that can develop and expand. So everything starts from one family. Evil started from one family and expanded. Goodness will start from one family and will be expanded. Having number two, having the significance of overcoming Jesus' second temptation on the world level, it fulfilled the endemic condition to restore God's second blessing worldwide. Three, establish the growth stage foundation to restore God's sovereignty by laying the growth stage foundation for the democratic world. So after the World War I, the League of Nations was established. League of Nations was something similar to United Nations. Some group of people gathered together, a group of nations, these democratic nations, and they formed the League of Nations. But again, the World War II happened. But after that, the able side, democratic nations of US, Britain, and France, when they got victory, United Nations in 1945 was established. What? God's sovereignty was going to develop more. The age for building a new heaven and new earth under the leadership of Christ at the second advent had begun, and the growth stage of the dispensation of second advent commenced. Okay? So at the consummation of human history, Satan's side and God's side will strive until they each attain sovereignty over a world. This is why the democratic world and the communist world stand confronting each other. Right? So after the World War II, actually, the communism start to expand and develop. And democracy also, democratic countries start to develop. And these two blocks, so the world has been divided in two blocks. One block was communist bloc, one side was democratic bloc. And these two blocks, they were confronting with each other. One side was representing Christianity, promoting Christian faith, God-centered. One side was denying God, which was communism. So the First and Second World Wars had the providential purpose of dividing the globe into the communist world and democratic world. Afterward, yet another war must take place to bring about their unification. This conflict is the Third World War. So the Third World War is inevitable, will happen. But what kind of war would it be? Is it a physical war or a different kinds of war? One way to bring Satan's side to surrender is through armed conflict. That's why God is democratic countries are very strong also in the terms of military, right? To protect. The other way this war may be fought is as a war, wholly internal, ideological conflict. By which of these two ways will the Third World War actually be fought? It depends upon the success or failure in carrying out the human portion of responsibility. It can be physical war, armed, military, or it can be ideologically war. It means there would be an ideology can surpass the ideology of the communism. By winning victory in the three world wars, which belong to the final chapter of the providential history. Number one, God intends to restore through indemnity the entire providence, which was prolonged to the third stage. So you remember number three is God's number, right? And God will get victory in the third step, third stage. Definitely God will fulfill his mission, his ideals, his goals, and his plan. So first Adam came, then Jesus came. After Jesus, the second coming of Jesus is the third Adam that God will take, through this person will fulfill the providence, complete the providence of the history. The providence of restoration can be completed only after fallen people restore their heart toward God through God's life-giving word, are saved both spiritually and physically, and inherit God's lineage. What happened? How the providence of restoration completed? Not through the force, not through the miracles, but we need to restore our heart. We need to change our character. We need to change our habits through the word of the God, God's word. This is number one, but not enough. We need to inherit God's lineage. What is that? Through the blessing that we are receiving from the God, right? So God's blessing. So we will be saved both spiritually and physically. The victories of God's side will fully restore through indemnity all the aspects of the providence of restoration. They will make possible the realization of God's ideal world, for which God has labored with unremitting tears over the centuries of human misery since the fall. So God's ideal world will be definitely established, will be realized. So this is a meaning, internal meaning of the world wars. So as we see, this last 400 years are preparation for receiving the Messiah, for making an ideal system and society. As it's started from, everything started from when did it start? the time of the two movements, Renaissance movement and Reformation movement. Renaissance movement was more on scientific humanism. Reformation was based on the faith, deepening our relationship with God, deepening our understanding about God, deepening our understanding about our spiritual world, deepening about our internal aspect of life. These two movements, these two ideas developed and matured into two kinds of opposing ideology. What is that two opposing ideology? What one was democracy, what one side was communism. And these two contradicted with each other. Cain and Abel conflict with each other. So as you remember, the time of the Adam's family, Cain killed Abel, right? Failed. But the time of the Jacob, as we study, Jacob and Esau, they embrace each other. They got victory. Cain and Abel embraced each other. So this Abel and Cain, they have two destiny. One is that they will have a physical conflict, armed conflict with each other, or they will embrace each other. Ideological conflict and the ideology. So who does the democracy has this power to fulfill that? No. That's why the Messiah is coming to bring the new truth that can overcome the ideology of the communism. Okay, so we will have the time for reflections or any questions. So I will hand it over to our very handsome MC, Mr. Herwin.